Hi, and welcome back to Relaxed Turtle Meditations. Tonight we are continuing our story, Treasure Island, by Robert Louis Stevenson. Make sure you're in a comfortable position, ready for bed. Let's begin. Chapter 6. Long John Silver. I dozed off in the coach. When I awoke, the day was breaking, and we were in a large city, Bristol. We got out and walked down the street towards the docks, where Mr. Trelawney was staying at an inn. We saw ships of all sizes and nations. Sailors were singing. Some were high overhead on ropes that looked like spider threads. I have lived by the shore all my life, but now I was truly near the sea. The smell of tar and salt was something new. I saw the most wonderful ships that had sailed the oceans. I saw old sailors with rings in their ears and whiskers curled in ringlets and pigtails. This was grander than seeing kings. And I was going to sea myself, to sea in the Hispaniola with pigtailed singing sailors, to sea bound for an unknown island and to seek for buried treasure. We came in front of a large inn and met Squire Trelawney, who was all smiles. He was dressed in blue like a sea officer. "Here you are," he cried, "and the doctor came last night from London. Bravo! The ship crew is complete." "Oh, sir," cried I, "when do we sail?" "Sail!" says he. "We sail tomorrow." After breakfast the squire gave me a note to take to Long John Silver. He said I would easily find his tavern, the Spyglass, along the docks. It had a large brass telescope for a sign. I set off, overjoyed to see some more of the ships and sailors. I made my way among a great crowd of people in carts, for the dock was now at its busiest, until I found the Spyglass Tavern. It was clean, bright, with neat red curtains and an open door. Inside were mostly seafaring men. They talked so loudly that I was almost afraid to enter. Then I saw a man come out of a side room. I was sure he must be Long John. His left leg was cut off close by the hip. Under the left shoulder he carried a crutch. He did well with this crutch, cheerfully hopping about upon it like a bird as he moved among the tables. He was very tall and strong, with a face as big as a ham, plain and pale, but intelligent and smiling. He whistled and merely gave a hearty slap on the shoulder to a few guests. Now, to tell you the truth, when I first heard of Long John Silver, I was afraid that he might be that one-legged man whom the captain feared. But now I knew this could not be that man. I knew what a pirate looked like. I had seen the captain and Black Dog and Blind Pew. This Long John Silver was pleasant and jolly, unlike those other miserable scoundrels. I plucked up courage at once and walked right up to the man. "Mr. Silver, sir?" I asked, holding out the note. "Yes, my lad," says he. "Such is my name, to be sure. And who may you be?" Then he looked at the squire's letter and said quite loudly, "Oh, I see. You are a new cabin boy. Pleased I am to see you." I shook his large, firm hand. Just then one of the men at the back table rose and ran for the door. I noticed him and recognized him at once. It was the man missing 2 fingers who had first come to the Admiral Benbow. "Oh!" I cried, "stop him! It's Black Dog!" "I don't care 2 coppers who he is," cried Silver. "He hasn't paid. Harry, run and catch him." One of the men near the door leapt up and ran after him. "Who did you say he was?" asked Silver. "Black what?" "Dog, sir," said I. "Didn't Squire Trelawney tell you about the pirates? That man was one of them." "That so?" cried Silver. "In my house? Ben, run and help Harry. One of those pirates, was he? Was that you sitting with him, Morgan? Step up here." Morgan, an old gray-haired, dark-faced sailor, came slowly forward. "Now, Morgan," said Silver very sternly, "you never set eyes on that, Black Dog before, did you now?" "Not I, sir," said Morgan with a salute. "You didn't know his name, did you?" "No, sir." "Get back to your seat, then." Well, let's see, Black Dog. No, I don't know the name. Not I. Yet I kind of think Yes, I have seen him. He used to come here with a blind beggar, he did. I knew that blind man, too, I said. His name was Pew. It was, cried Silver. Pew. That were his name for certain. Ah, he looked like a shark, he did. But Ben will run that black dog down. Silver went stumping up and down the tavern on his crutch, slapping the tables with his hand. I began again to wonder about this man. After all, I had seen Black Dog in his tavern. The men came back with no Black Dog. Silver was very upset. "See here, Hawkins," he said. "What will Captain Trelawney think? Me with a pirate in my tavern. But I see you're a smart lad, smart as paint. You saw that we tried to catch him? Why, shiver my timbers, what could I do on this leg of mine? I'll walk along with you and tell Trelawney the story." On our little walk to the inn, along the docks, Silver told me interesting things about the different boats. He knew all where they were going and what they were loading. He told me stories and taught me seafaring words and phrases. He was one of the best shipmates a lad could hope for. When we got to the inn, the squire and Dr. Livesey were seated together. Long John told the story of Black Dog in his tavern. "That was how it were, now weren't it, Hawkins?" he said now and again. The squire and the doctor both agreed that there was nothing more to be done about it. Long John took up his crutch and hobbled out the door. "All hands on deck by 4 this afternoon," shouted the squire after him. "Aye, aye, sir," cried the sea cook. "Well, squire," said Dr. Livesey, "this John Silver suits me." "The man's a good sort," said the squire. "And now, Hawkins, take up your hat, and we'll see the ship." Chapter 7. We Set Sail. The Hispaniola lay some way out. As we stepped aboard, we were met and saluted by the first mate, Mr. Arrow. He was a brown old sailor with earrings in his ears and a squint. He and Squire Trelawney were very friendly, but the squire did not like our ship's captain, Captain Smollett. Our captain was a sharp-looking man who seemed angry with everything on board. In a private meeting with the squire, the doctor, and me, the captain let us know his views. "I don't like this cruise. I don't like the men. And I don't like my officer, Mr. Arrow. And there it is," the captain said. He went on to say that he should have selected his own men, and did not like the rumors he was hearing from the sailors, that this was a voyage in search of treasure, with a pirate's map to follow. "I never told that to a soul," cried the squire. "The men know it, sir," said the captain. "I don't know who has this map, but I want it kept secret, from me and from the crew, and from the first mate, Mr. Arrow." "You don't like Mr. Arrow?" asked the doctor. "He's too friendly with the crew, and he stumbles about. I fear he drinks, sir. I am responsible for the ship's safety and the life of every man aboard her. I will speak up when I fear trouble, for 'tis my duty, sir. Treasure cruises are never safe, sir." And with that he took his leave. "Trelawney," said the doctor, "I believe you have 2 honest men on board with you, that captain and John Silver." "Silver, if you like," cried the squire, "but not that captain. He does not set well by me." "Well," said the doctor, "we shall see." All that night we hustled about, loading and getting the ship ready to sail. I was dog-tired. A little before dawn the sailor sounded his pipe, and the crew began to man the capstan bars, which means they started to bring up the anchor. "Now, Barbecue, give us a tune," cried one voice. "The old tune," cried another. "Aye, aye, mates," said Long John, who was standing by with his crutch under his arm. At once he sang out the tune and the words I knew so well. 15 men on a dead man's chest," and the whole crew joined in. "Yo ho ho, and a bottle of rum." And at the last ho, they all pushed on the capstan bars, hauling the anchor up a little more each time. Soon the anchor was up and the sails began to fill. The Hispaniola had begun her voyage to the Isle of Treasure. The ship proved to be a good ship. The crew were able seamen, and the captain understood his business. But before we got to Treasure Island, 2 or 3 things happened that I must record and make known. Mr. Arrow, first of all, turned out even worse than the captain had feared. No one listened to his orders, he was clumsy and sloppy, and it was thought that he must be drunk. Nobody was surprised when one dark night he disappeared and was seen no more. "Overboard," said the captain, shaking his head. "Job Anderson was named first new mate. He watched our course and helped the captain, and the coxswain, the man who steered the ship, was Israel Hands. He was a wily, old, experienced sailor who could be trusted with almost anything. But my favorite of them all was Long John Silver. He was a good sea cook, and the men called him Barbecue. He carried his crutch by a rope around his neck. This way both hands were free for cooking. He kept his cook's galley as clean as a new pin. The dishes were always hanging up. In one corner was his parrot in a cage. "He's no common man, that Barbecue," said Coxswain to me. "He's as brave as a lion. I seen him grapple 4 men and knock their heads together." All the crew respected and even obeyed Long John Silver. He had a way of helping each man in some special way. Long John Silver was always kind to me, and always glad to see me in the cook's galley. "Come away, Hawkins," he would say. "Come and have a yarn with John. You're young, you are, but you're as smart as paint. I seen that when I first set my eyes on you. I can talk to you like a man, my son. Sit you down and hear the news. I calls my parrot Cap'n Flint, after the famous buccaneer. Cap'n Flint was just saying our voyage will be a success, wasn't you, Cap'n?" And the parrot would say very quickly, "Pieces of 8, pieces of 8, pieces of 8. "Now that bird," he would say, "is maybe 200 years old, Hawkins. They live forever, mostly. She's sailed with pirates, she has. She's been to Madagascar and Malabar and Portobello. That's how she learned pieces of 8. You've seen a mite of gold in your time, ain't you, Cap'n?" "Stand by to go about," the parrot would scream. The squire and Captain Smollett did not speak to each other much. The squire despised the captain. The captain admitted he liked the ship once it had sailed. Still he muttered, "But I don't like the cruise." Chapter 8. What I Heard in the Apple Barrel. Every man on board seemed well content, and never was a ship's company so spoilt. Double grog was often served, and there was plum pudding every few days. Plus, we always had a huge barrel of apples on deck for anyone to help himself. "Spoil the hands and you make devils, that's my belief," the captain said to Dr. Livesey. "Never knew good come of it." But good did come of the apple barrel, as you shall hear, for it had not been for that, we might have all perished. This was how it came about. It was about the last day of our voyage. We were expecting to see Treasure Island late that night or early next day. The Hispaniola rolled steadily. Everyone was in the bravest spirits because we were so near an end of the first part of our adventure. Now, just after sundown, when all my work was over, I decided to have an apple. The huge apple barrel was nearly empty, so I just crawled over into the barrel. I sat right down inside to enjoy an apple. I was so tired that the sound of the waters and the rocking movements of the ship put me nearly to sleep. I was jolted awake when a heavy man sat down close by. The barrel shook as he leaned his shoulders against it. I was just about to jump up when the man began to speak. It was Silver's voice. Before I had heard a dozen words, I would not have shown myself for all the world. Instead, I lay there, trembling and listening. Just from Silver's first few words, I realized that all the honest men on board were in danger. What I heard that night in the apple barrel chilled me to the bone. Long John Silver was telling one of the young sailors, Dick, about his pirate days. "Flint was cap'n," he said. "It was on the same plunder that old Pew lost his eyes, and that I lost this leg. But we got a lot of gold, we did." "Ah," cried the young sailor, "I hear he was the best, was Flint." Long John Silver went on to brag about his adventures. He said that most of Flint's old men were here, on the Hispaniola. He was trying to get poor Dick to join the pirates. "You look here," Silver said. "You're young, you are, but you're as smart as paint. I seen that when I first set my eyes on you. I'll talk to you like a man." You may imagine how I felt. These were the same words the villain had said to me. "You'd make a fine gentleman of fortune, Dick," Silver went on. "They live rough and they risk hanging from the gallows, but they get gold, they do, pounds and pounds of it. Ah, you may be sure of getting rich on old John's ship." "Well," replied Dick, "I didn't like the idea till I had this talk with you, John, but here's my hand." "And a brave lad you are," answered Silver. They shook hands so heartily that the barrel shook. "And a finer gentleman of fortune I never clapped my eyes on." By this time I understood that a gentleman of fortune was just a common pirate. Silver had Dick on his side now. Silver gave a little whistle, and a third man strolled up and sat down. "Dick is with us," said Silver. "Oh, I knowed Dick was smart," returned a voice. It was Israel Hands. "He's no fool. When are we going to do him in, Barbecue?" "Here's the plan, men," said Silver. "They've got the map, so we'll let this squire and doctor find the stuff and get it aboard. Then we'll finish 'em at the island." "But," asked Dick, "shouldn't we just leave 'em on the island?" "Put 'em ashore and maroon 'em," said the sea-cook rascal, "or cut 'em down." "Dead men don't bite," said Israel Hands. "Right you are," said Silver. "I give my vote death. Wait is what I say, but when the time comes, why let her rip. But I claim Trelawney. He's mine." Then he added in a cheery voice, "Dick, jump up like a sweet lad and get me an apple." Imagine my terror! I heard Dick begin to rise, and then almost at the same time the voice of the lookout shouted, "Land ho!" There was a great rush of feet across the deck. I slipped out of that apple barrel and dived behind the foresail. No one had noticed. I ran for the open deck to look for the squire and the doctor. Everyone was staring out to sea. We saw an island with 2 low hills and a third and higher hill. The highest peak was buried in the fog. I heard Captain Smollett giving orders. It all seemed like a foggy dream, for I was still in terror from what I had just overheard. "And now, men," said the captain, "has any one of you ever seen that land ahead?" "I have, sir," said Silver, "when I was a cook for a trader ship. That hill to the north they calls the Foremast Hill. The far south hill is Mizzen Mast Hill. The highest in the middle they call Spyglass Hill. There's a harbor just round it, with a small island. Skeleton Island they calls it, in the harbor cove." "Thank you, my man," said Captain Smollett. "I'll ask you later on to give us some help. You may go." I was surprised at how coolly John told of the island. A shudder went through when he laid his hand upon my arm. "Ah," says he, "this here's a sweet spot, this island, a sweet spot for a lad to get ashore on. You'll bathe, and you'll climb trees, and you'll hunt goats, you will. Why, it makes me young again. When you want to do a bit of exploring, you just ask old John, and he'll give you a snack to take along." I found Captain Smollett, the squire, and Dr. Livesey, talking together on quarter-deck. I whispered to the doctor, "Bring the captain and squire down to the cabin. I have terrible news." In the cabin the squire said, "Now, Hawkins, you have something to say. Speak up." I told the whole details of Silver's plans. Nobody interrupted me. They kept their eyes upon my face, from first to last. "Well, gentlemen," said the captain, "we can't turn back. We must keep a bright lookout. The map shows a stockade with a blockhouse near the harbor. We'll hold up there and do our planning. We have the 4 of us, plus Trelawney's home servants, Rudith, Hunter, and Joyce. That makes 7 against their 19, and there may be more that come to our side. Jim here," said the doctor, "can help us more than anyone. The men are friendly with him. Jim is a noticing lad. Hawkins, I put my great faith in you," added Squire Trelawney. "Only 7 against 19, and one of these 7 was me, a boy." Chapter 9. My Shore Adventure. The next morning I hurried on deck to see the island. I could see its 3 wooded hills and the yellow sand on the beach. Still, to me, the island looked gray and sad. From that first look I hated the very thought of Treasure Island. All the way in, Long John stood by the man at the wheel and directed the ship. He knew the passage like the palm of his hand. We sailed 3 or 4 miles around the corner of the island and came up into a passage into a natural harbor. The main island lay to one side, and the small skeleton island was on the other. We dropped anchor in the same spot that had been marked on our map. The shoreline looked flat and led into the woods. 2 little swampy rivers emptied into the cove. From the ship we could not see the stockade or the blockhouse, which were marked on the map. The cove had a rotten odor. I saw the doctor sniffing and sniffing like someone tasting a bad egg. "I don't know about treasure," he said, "but I'll bet my wig there's fever here. Smells of malaria." We had much work, for the little jolly boats had to be loaded. The men grumbled over their work in the hot sun. Anderson was in charge of the boat I worked on, and he grumbled the loudest. The crew was edgy and itching to get ashore. The captain called a private meeting in his cabin. He had decided to let the grumpy crew have an afternoon on the shore. Hunter, Joyce, and Rudith were told about the pirate gang on board. Pistols were handed out to the 7 of us honest men. When the captain announced to the crew that they could take the jolly boats to shore, they cheered. The cheer echoed off the hills and sent the birds flying and squawking around the harbor. I believe the silly fellows must have thought they'd find treasure the minute they landed. As soon as the captain was in his cabin, Silver sneakily took over as leader. He gathered up 12 men to go on shore with him. 6 of the crew were to stay on the ship, along with our 7. It was then that I had my first wild idea, which ended up saving our lives. I decided to slip ashore, too. In a jiffy, I slipped over the side and curled up in front of the nearest boat. Almost at the same moment, the boat shoved off. No one noticed me but the man at the oar. "Is that you, Jim?" "Keep your head down." But Silver looked sharply over from his boat. "Is that Jim there?" he called. I began to regret what I had done. My boat was the first to come along the wooded part of the shore. I caught hold of a tree branch. As we passed by, I swung myself out and plunged into the bushes where Silver and the rest were still a ways behind. "Jim! Jim!" I heard Silver shouting. As you can guess, I did not answer. I ran, jumped, and ducked through the bushes until I could run no longer. I had given the slip to Long John Silver. Now I could explore this strange land. I found swamps and also a sandy area with a few pine trees. I could see one of the hills with 2 craggy peaks shining in the sun. I was truly on my own. No one lived on the island. My shipmates were far behind me, and I was free. I saw strange flowers and snakes. One raised its head up from a rock and hissed at me with a noise that sounded like a rattle. One area had small, twisted oaks that grew in clumps. I followed these oaks till I came to one of the little rivers that emptied into the swampy cove. The swamp was streaming in the strong sun. I could see Spyglass Hill through the haze. Suddenly I heard 2 voices, and one was Long John Silver's. I crawled into the tangle of small oaks, silent as a mouse. Peeking through the leaves, I could see down beside the swamp. There was Silver talking to Tom, a crewman, in the hot sun. I could hear Silver trying to get Tom to join the side of the pirates, and Tom was not in agreement. "Silver," said Tom, "I won't join that mess of swabs. I'd sooner lose my hand." "If I turn against my duty—" Tom was interrupted by a cry of anger that came from far out in the marsh. Then came one long, horrid scream. The rocks of Spyglass Hill made the scream echo over the island. Birds rose into the air. It was the scream of death, and it was ringing in my brain. Tom was startled by the scream, but Silver just rested on his crutch, watching Tom like a snake about to spring. "John, in heaven's name, who was that?" "That?" Silver smiled calmly. "Oh, I reckon that was Allen." "Allen!" Tom cried. "Rest his soul. John Silver, you're no mate of mine. If I die like a dog, I'll die doing my duty. You've killed Ellen, haven't you? Kill me too if you can, but I won't join you." And with that, this brave fellow began to walk away. Silver grabbed the branch of a tree, whipped the crutch out of his armpit, and threw it like a spear. It struck poor Tom right between the shoulders in the middle of his back. His hands flew up, and he gave a sort of gasp and fell down. The whole world seemed to swirl around me as I fainted from shock. When I came to, the monster had his crutch back under his arm. Tom lay on the ground, dead. I could not believe a human life had been cut so short, so cruelly before my eyes. Silver then blew upon his whistle. I instantly got out of my hiding spot and headed towards the woods. I could hear calls between Silver and the other pirates. I ran, as I never ran before, full of fear. It was all over, I thought. Goodbye to the Hispaniola. Goodbye to the squire, the doctor, and the captain. I was still running when I came to a little hill with two peaks. The air was fresh here, and I stopped to breathe deeply. But here a fresh scare started my heart thumping even more. Chapter 10. The Man of the Island. I saw something dark and shaggy slip behind the trunk of a pine tree. Filled with this new terror, I started to run back the way I came, but the figure kept up with me, leaping like a deer between the tree trunks. Somehow I found the courage to stop and face the strange animal. It must have been watching me. It stepped out from behind the tree, hid again, then stepped out again, and fell to his knees. It was a man. "Who are you?" I asked. "Ben Gunn," he answered in a cracked voice that sounded like a rusty lock. "I'm poor Ben Gunn, I am. I haven't spoke with a man these 3 years." He was an odd sight. His skin was burnt by the sun, and even his lips were black. He was the most ragged man I had ever seen. His clothes were made from old tattered ship sails and goat skins. A brass-buckled leather belt, leather strings, brass buttons, and bits of stick held his outfit together. 3 years!" I cried. "You were shipwrecked?" "Nay, mate," he said. "I were marooned." Marooned. I knew the word. This meant he had been left alone on the island as punishment. "Marooned 3 years ago," he said, as he felt my jacket and looked at my boots. "I lived on goats and berries and oysters, but mate, my heart is sore from some tasty food. Do you happen to have a piece of cheese about you?" "No? Well, many nights I've dreamt of cheese, toasted mostly." "If ever I can get aboard the ship again," I said, "you shall have cheese by the pound." "If ever you can get aboard again, eh?" he repeated. "Why, now, Ben Gunn can help you there. What do you call yourself, mate?" "Jim," I told him. "Well, Jim," he whispered, "I'm rich." I now felt sure that this poor fellow had gone crazy alone on this island. "Rich, rich, I say," he went on. "You'll bless your stars, Jim, that you were the first one to find me." He gripped my hand tighter and raised a finger. "Now, Jim, you tell me true. That ain't Flint's ship, is it?" he asked. "It's not Flint's ship, and Flint is dead. But there are some of Flint's men aboard." "Not a man with one leg," he gasped. "Silver?" I asked. "Ah, Silver," says he. "That were his name." "He's the cook and the ringleader, too," I told him. I told him the whole story of our voyage and the pirates. When I had told him all, he patted me on the head. "You're a good lad, Jim," he said, "and you're all in a knot of trouble, ain't you? Well, you can trust Ben Gunn. Would your squire be needin' help from a man with, say, 1,000 pounds of money?" "I'm sure he would," said I. "And would he give this man away home?" he added with a sharp eye. "The squire's a gentleman," I cried. "He'll take you. Besides, you could help us sail the ship home." "So I could, Jim. Now I'll tell you my story," he said. "I were in Flint's ship when he buried the treasure. He and 6 strong sailors, they were ashore for a week. Me and Billy Bones and John Silver stayed aboard our ship, the Walrus. One fine day, here come Flint by himself in a little boat. And where were the other 6? Murdered and buried. And where was the treasure? Buried on the island. Well, 3 years ago I was in another ship, and we sailed near this island. 'Boys,' said I, 'here's Flint's treasure. Let's land and find it.' 12 days we looked for it, but found nothing. My mates were so angry with me they sailed off without me. Well, Jim, 3 years I have been here. You tell the squire this. I spend some time in prayer, and I spend other times thinking about my dear mother, but most of the time was took up with another matter. And then you'll give the squire a pinch, like this." He winked at me and pinched my arm. "Well," I said, "I don't know what you mean, but it doesn't matter. We don't have a way to get on board the ship, and the pirates are sure to take it." "Ah," said he, "that's the hitch. Well, I've made me a boat with my 2 hands. I keep her under the large white rock. We might try that after dark." And just then the island echoed with the thunder of cannon fire. "Hi!" he cried. "What's that?" "That's the cannon on the ship. They have begun to fight," I cried. "Follow me." I ran towards the cove. The goatskin man trotted along, saying as we ran, "Keep to your left, mate, under the trees. There where I killed my first goat. Ah, and there's the cemetery. I come here and prays when I think on a Sunday is due." Next we heard gunfire. Then up ahead I saw the Union Jack, our British flag, flutter in the air above the high picket fence of a stockade. When Ben Gunn saw the flag, he stopped and sat down. "There's your friends, sure enough," he said. "Or the pirates," I answered. "Nay, Silver flies the Jolly Roger with the skull and the crossbones. There's been fighting, and your friends are in the stockade. Flint made years ago." "Well," said I, "let's hurry on and join them." "Nay, mate," said Ben, "not till I see your squire, and has his word that he'll help me. And when you want Ben Gunn, you know where to find him. Just where you found him today. And Jim, if you see Silver, you wouldn't tell on Ben Gunn, would you?" Then came another loud boom. A cannonball tore through the trees and landed in the sand near us. We took off running in different directions. For an hour the boom of the cannon shook the island, and balls kept crashing through the woods. I moved towards the cove, staying away from the stockade where the cannonballs were aimed. The sun had just set. A cold sea breeze was ruffling the gray water. The tide was out, and the sandy area led to Skeleton Island across the cove. The Hispaniola was still anchored, but she was flying the Jolly Roger. I knew then that my friends were inside the stockade. I must get back to it. As I rose to my feet, I saw a huge white rock out on the sandy area towards Skeleton Island. Could this be the white rock that Ben Gunn had spoken of, where he said he had hidden a boat? I kept this in mind as I made my way through the woods. I reached the stockade and climbed over the tall picket fence. I landed inside and saw my faithful friends as they ran over to joyfully greet me. But it was also a sad greeting, for not all my friends were there. I learned that old Thomas Rudith had been killed. The doctor led me to the blockhouse and told me what had happened. And that is all for tonight. I will read the next 5 chapters next week. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and good night.